I don't need you or that baby. You're worthless without me. I said get out. Take your mess and go. Find someone else to pity you, because I'm done.
I can't believe you.
She was 7 months pregnant when he slammed the door in her face, his laughter cutting deeper than the cold wind. Get out! I don't need you or that baby. You're worthless without me, he spat, tossing her few belongings into the muddy yard. Neighbors whispered, some laughed, some shook their heads in pity. She stood there shivering, clutching her belly, wondering how she would survive the night.
Hey, are you alright? You shouldn't be out here like this.
I didn't know where else to go.
It's okay. I've got you. Let's get you out of the rain.
For the first time that night, someone saw her not as a burden or a joke, but as a human being deserving of kindness. That single act of empathy would change the course of her life forever. What do you think happened next? Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. Lena used to believe love could survive anything. She believed in late nights of laughter, shared dreams over coffee, and promises whispered under cheap bedsheets. But that belief had begun to rot the day her husband stopped looking her in the eye. The night was quiet except for the ticking wall clock and the sound of rain tapping on the windows. Lena sat on the couch, both hands on her swollen belly, waiting. Ethan was late again. His phone had been going straight to voicemail for hours. She'd already reheated dinner twice. The rice had gone cold, the chicken dry. She tried to tell herself maybe traffic was bad or he had a late meeting, but the perfume she smelled on his shirts each night didn't come from any boardroom. She knew it wasn't her imagination. It was too sweet, too heavy, the kind that lingered in the air long after he'd walked out of the room. When she finally heard the engine pull up outside, her heart leaped, then sank. He didn't even close the car door gently anymore. He slammed it, stomped into the house, and tossed his jacket onto the floor. "You're home late again," she said softly, trying not to sound afraid. "Yeah, and?" He didn't even look at her. "Why are you sitting there staring at me like that?" "I made dinner," she said. "It's cold now, but I can warm it." "I already ate," he interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. Her heart dropped. "You already ate?" "Yeah. Vanessa brought me something." "Don't start," Lena blinked. "Vanessa?" He gave her a sharp look. "My boss's daughter. You've met her at the company party. Don't twist it." Her fingers trembled as she tried to keep her voice calm. "Ethan, you've been coming home late every night. You don't talk to me anymore. You don't even ask how the baby's doing. You're not the same person I married." He turned around slowly, eyes cold, almost bored. "And you're not the woman I married either. You used to be fun. Now all you do is nag and cry and complain about being lonely. You think that's attractive?" Lena's throat tightened. "I'm 7 months pregnant, Ethan. I'm carrying our child," he scoffed. "Yeah, and somehow that became an excuse to stop being a wife." Her eyes filled. "I gave up my job for you. I gave up my friends, my apartment, everything, because you said you wanted a family." He walked over, towering above her, the smell of cologne and alcohol thick on his shirt. "Yeah, well, maybe I changed my mind." The words hit her like a slap. She stood up, her belly heavy, heart pounding. "What are you saying?" He smiled without warmth. "I'm saying maybe this whole thing," he gestured around the room, "was a mistake." Lena stared at him, disbelief twisting through her chest. "A mistake?" "Ethan, we planned this baby together." He shrugged. "Plans change." Something inside her cracked then. She could handle the distance, the lies, even the late nights. But the casual cruelty broke her. "There's someone else, isn't there?" she whispered. He didn't answer. That silence was louder than any confession. Lena took a step back, tears spilling. "Who is she?" He grabbed his phone, scrolling with an infuriating calm. I don't have time for your drama tonight. She moved closer, her voice trembling but strong. Ethan, look at me and tell me there isn't someone else. He finally looked up. You really want to know? Her breath caught. Fine, he said coldly. There is, and she's everything you're not. The words tore through her chest. She covered her mouth trying to breathe, but her lungs refused. Ethan sighed as if her heartbreak was an inconvenience. Stop crying. You wanted honesty. Lena shook her head, trembling. After everything I've done for you, after all the nights I prayed for you when you were broke and sick. Yeah, I know, he said, rolling his eyes. You love to remind me how much you sacrificed. You think that gives you the right to chain me to your misery? Her voice cracked. I'm your wife. He laughed, cruel and low. You're my mistake. A loud knock interrupted them. Ethan frowned, then smirked. Oh, perfect timing. He walked to the door and opened it. Lena's heart froze when she saw her. Vanessa stood there, tall, confident, and smiling like she owned the place. She was wearing a red dress that looked too expensive for this small living room, her blonde hair styled to perfection. Hi, babe, she said sweetly, brushing past Lena as if she were invisible. She kissed Ethan lightly on the lips and turned to look around the house. So this is where you used to live? Cute. A little small, though. Lena's stomach twisted. What is she doing here? Ethan smiled faintly. Vanessa's moving in. Lena thought she misheard. What? Vanessa placed her handbag on the table. You heard him. I'm tired of sneaking around. Ethan said he's done pretending. Pretending? Lena's voice cracked. I'm his wife. Vanessa chuckled softly. Oh, honey. You were Lena's body shook from rage and humiliation. Ethan, tell her to leave. Tell her this is my home. Ethan turned to her, face hardening. No, you leave. Her knees weakened. Ethan, please, don't do this. I have nowhere to go. I'm carrying your child. He crossed his arms. Not my problem. You'll figure something out. You always do. Lena stared at him in disbelief. You're throwing me out? At night? In the rain? Better than letting you embarrass me in front of my new woman? Vanessa smirked and leaned against the doorframe. You really should go before this gets ugly. Tears streamed down Lena's face as she looked at the man she thought she knew. I loved you, Ethan. He shrugged. That's your problem, not mine. She turned toward the couch, grabbing the small bag she had packed for the hospital weeks ago, her hands trembling so hard she could barely zip it. If I walk out that door, Ethan, there's no coming back. He grinned. That's the idea. Something inside her broke completely. She looked at Vanessa, then at Ethan, her heart turning cold. You'll regret this one day. Ethan laughed, a hollow sound that filled the small room. Doubt it. She took a deep breath and opened the door. The cold air slapped her face, mixing with the tears on her cheeks. Rain was pouring down, soaking her thin sweater instantly. Behind her, she heard Vanessa's voice again, playful and cruel. Don't forget your leftovers, sweetheart, Vanessa said, tossing a plastic container onto the porch. It landed near Lena's feet, spilling rice into the mud. Ethan's laughter joined hers. You should be grateful we didn't call the cops for trespassing. Lena froze in the doorway, shivering. You're a monster, she whispered. Call me whatever you want, Ethan said, stepping back inside. Just make sure you're gone by the time I finish this drink. He slammed the door, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Lena stood motionless in the rain, her hands pressed to her belly. Thunder rolled in the distance and lightning flashed across the sky. Her mind spun. How had everything collapsed so fast? Neighbors began peeking through their windows. A few whispered behind curtains. One old woman across the street shook her head and muttered something, but no one came outside. Nobody wanted to get involved. Lena started walking, her shoes sinking into the mud. Every step hurt. The rain soaked her hair, her clothes, everything she owned. Her stomach cramped, a dull ache that made her stop every few feet. She whispered to her unborn baby, voice trembling. It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here. We'll be okay. But she didn't believe it. She didn't even know where she was going. Behind her, she thought she heard laughter again. She turned, half expecting Ethan to call her back, to realize what he'd done. But the house lights dimmed and the curtains closed. He was gone from her life. Just like that, Lena kept walking until the streetlights blurred through her tears. Somewhere between heartbreak and exhaustion, she realized the only person she could turn to was her mother. But even that thought brought dread. Her mother had warned her years ago not to marry Ethan. "That boy's got ambition, but no soul," she had said. "He'll use you and throw you away." And now he had. Lena stopped under a street lamp, the wind cutting through her wet clothes. She pulled her coat tighter around her belly and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." "You were right," lightning cracked again, followed by a roar of thunder. She started walking faster, shivering, trying to ignore the dizziness creeping in. Then her phone buzzed. She pulled it out with numb fingers, hoping maybe it was her mother or a friend. But the message on the screen made her heart stop. It was from Ethan. "Don't bother going to your mom's. I told her you ran away with another man." Her hand shook so violently the phone almost slipped. She stared at the words until they blurred through her tears. "No," she whispered. "No, he wouldn't." But he would. The man she'd loved had not only thrown her out, he had destroyed her name. Her vision blurred again, and the ache in her stomach sharpened. She pressed a hand there, trying to breathe. "Please, not now," she whispered to the baby. "Please, stay with me." The rain poured harder. Her strength was slipping. She stumbled to the edge of the road, leaning against a lamppost. Her body shook from cold and heartbreak. Then through the blur of rain and headlights, she heard the sound of a car slowing down beside her. That's where part 2 will pick up. The moment Alexander's car stops and her life begins to change. The rain fell harder, soaking through her clothes until she could barely feel her skin. Lena leaned against the lamppost, clutching her belly, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her phone slipped from her trembling hand and fell into a puddle, its screen flickering out. She didn't even bend to pick it up. The headlights from the car stopped a few feet away, slicing through the downpour. The engine hummed quietly. For a second, she thought it was Ethan coming back, maybe out of guilt. But the car was sleek and black, too expensive for him. The door opened slowly, and a man stepped out, holding an umbrella. He walked toward her with calm, steady steps, his shoes splashing softly in the water. His voice was deep but gentle. "Hey, are you all right?" Lena blinked up at him through the rain. His face was shadowed by the umbrella, but she could see kind eyes studying her with concern. I'm fine," she whispered, even though her voice shook. "You don't look fine," he said quietly. "You're freezing. You shouldn't be out here like this." She hugged her belly, trying to keep her balance. I need to get somewhere." He tilted his head, studying her for a moment. "You're pregnant. You need to get out of the rain. Come on, let me drive you somewhere safe." She shook her head. "No, thank you. I don't even know you." "That's fair," he said softly, his tone steady, patient. "My name's Alexander. I'm not here to hurt you. I just can't leave you standing here in this storm." She hesitated. His voice didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like warmth in the middle of her nightmare. The cold wind bit through her soaked clothes again, and she finally nodded weakly. "Okay," she whispered. He stepped closer and held the umbrella over her. "Easy now. Watch your step." When he guided her toward the car, she could smell the faint scent of cedar and rain on him. It was strange. She hadn't felt safe near a man in months, but something about him calmed her, even through her shivering. He opened the car door, and she slid into the passenger seat. The heat hit her instantly. She gasped, the sudden warmth almost painful against her numb skin. He set the umbrella aside and handed her a clean towel from the back seat. "Here," he said gently. "You're shaking." "Thank you," she murmured, clutching it close. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to be a burden." He glanced at her, his expression softening. "You're not a burden. Everyone needs help sometimes." The car pulled away from the curb. For a while, neither of them spoke. The rain drummed against the windows, and Lena watched the city blur past, her reflection pale and hollow in the glass. After a long silence, Alexander spoke again. "You want to tell me where we're going?" She hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "My husband, he threw me out." His eyes flickered toward her. "He what?" "He said he didn't need me anymore." Her voice cracked. "He has someone else now." Alexander's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his tone gentle. And you're out here? Like this? 7 months pregnant? She looked down at her trembling hands. He said I was worthless without him. He was quiet for a long moment. Then softly he said, he's wrong. The words hit her harder than she expected. She bit her lip, tears threatening again. You don't even know me. I don't have to, he said. Nobody deserves to be treated that way. She wiped her face, trying to steady her breathing. I can't go to my mother's. He told her I ran off with another man. She won't believe me. Alexander's eyes darkened with disbelief. He said that? She nodded. I saw the message myself. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. That's cruel. Some people don't understand the damage they cause until it's too late. Lena stared out the window again. He used to be kind. Back when we were broke, we promised we'd face everything together. I didn't know he'd turn into this. Alexander glanced at her. Money changes people. Sometimes it shows who they really are. She gave a bitter laugh that ended in a sob. Then maybe I was blind from the start. No, he said softly. You just believed in him. That's not blindness. That's love. The wrong person doesn't make your love a mistake. The kindness in his tone broke her completely. She pressed her face into the towel and cried quietly, trying to muffle the sound. Alexander didn't say anything more. He just reached into the back seat, took out a blanket, and draped it gently over her shoulders without a word. When the sobs faded, she whispered, Thank you. I don't even know where you're taking me. He smiled faintly. Somewhere warm. Somewhere safe. The car eventually stopped in front of a large modern building with warm lights glowing through tall glass windows. It didn't look like a hotel. It looked like someone's home. She frowned. What is this place? My house, he said simply. I have extra rooms. You can rest here tonight, and tomorrow you can decide what you want to do. Lena shook her head. I can't stay here. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing, he said. It's just one night. Please. The sincerity in his voice left her no room to argue. She followed him inside. The foyer was elegant but not showy, decorated with paintings and soft lighting. Everything smelled faintly of coffee and fresh linen. A woman in her 50s appeared from the hallway, wearing a maid's uniform. Mr. Cole? Everything all right? Alexander nodded toward Lena. She needs a guest room. And some dry clothes, please. The woman's expression softened when she saw Lena's soaked condition. Oh, poor thing. Come, dear. Let's get you warm. Lena followed her upstairs, barely able to keep her eyes open. She changed into a loose nightgown the woman gave her, then sat on the edge of the bed. The sheets were soft, and for the first time in hours, she didn't feel the rain or the cold. But she couldn't stop shaking. Her mind kept replaying Ethan's face, his laughter, Vanessa's red dress, the sound of the door slamming shut. A soft knock came at the door. Alexander stepped in, holding a cup of tea. You should drink something warm, he said gently. She looked up, her eyes red. You didn't have to do all this. I know, he said, but I wanted to. She hesitated, then took the cup from him. The warmth spread through her hands. Thank you. He leaned against the doorway. Try to sleep, all right? You're safe here. When he left, Lena turned off the lamp and lay down. The tears came again, slow and silent. Her hand rested on her belly. We're safe, she whispered to her baby. At least for now. But sleep didn't last long. Sometime in the night, a sharp pain stabbed through her stomach. She gasped and sat up, clutching her belly. The pain came again, stronger this time. She cried out, panicking. The maid rushed in. Miss! What's wrong? Lena's voice broke. It's the baby! Something's wrong! The woman yelled down the hallway. Mr. Cole! Hurry! Alexander appeared almost instantly, barefoot, still in his white shirt. What happened? She's in pain, the maid said urgently. Lena's face was pale, her breath short and uneven. It hurts! Oh God, it hurts! Alexander moved quickly. Call the doctor. Get the car ready, now! Within minutes, he was carrying her carefully down the stairs, trying to steady her as she clung to his shirt, trembling. Rain still poured outside as he helped her into the car and drove through the storm toward the hospital. "Stay with me, Lena," he said, glancing at her every few seconds. "Don't close your eyes." Tears streamed down her face. "Please don't let anything happen to my baby," she whispered. "You'll be fine." "I promise," he said, even though his voice shook slightly. They reached the hospital. Nurses rushed out with a stretcher. Alexander followed as they wheeled her in, his heart pounding. She kept calling for him as they pushed her through the double doors. He tried to go in, but a nurse stopped him. "Please wait here, sir." Minutes felt like hours. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and rain. Alexander paced the floor, hands clenched, listening to the muffled voices behind the door. Finally, a doctor came out, removing his gloves. His expression was serious. Alexander stepped forward. "How is she?" The doctor hesitated, then said quietly, "She lost a lot of blood. The baby's in distress. We might lose them both." Alexander froze, the words echoing in his head as thunder rolled outside once more. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from, and how did this story speak to you? The world came back to her in pieces, like light flickering through a fog. First the beeping, then the cold air, then the ache that stretched across her body like she'd been split in two. Lena opened her eyes to the harsh white glow of a hospital room. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the memories came back in waves, the rain, the car, the pain, Alexander's voice shouting her name. Her lips were dry when she tried to speak. "The baby?" A nurse appeared beside her, smiling softly. "Shh. You're both okay. You scared us for a while, sweetheart, but you're safe now." Lena's eyes filled. "The baby's alive?" "Yes," the nurse said. "A little early, but strong. He's in the neonatal unit right now. You'll see him soon." Tears rolled down Lena's cheeks, warm and unstoppable. She whispered a thank you she could barely finish. When the nurse left, the door opened again. Alexander stepped in quietly, still wearing the same shirt from the night before, sleeves rolled to his elbows, eyes heavy with exhaustion. For a moment, Lena thought she was dreaming. He looked out of place in the sterile room, too calm, too controlled. "You're awake," he said softly. She nodded, her voice faint. "You stayed?" He gave a tired smile. "You think I'd just leave you here?" Her throat tightened. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said simply. He sat in the chair beside her bed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet hum of machines filled the space between them. Finally, she said, "You saved my life." Alexander shook his head. "You did the hard part." I just drove. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, but her eyes were full of questions she didn't have the courage to ask. Over the next few days, Lena recovered slowly. The hospital room became her small world, sterile but safe. Alexander came every morning, sometimes with breakfast, sometimes with flowers, always with the same quiet steadiness that made her uneasy. She didn't understand him. People didn't just help strangers anymore. Not like this. Not with this kind of devotion. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, she asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Why are you doing this for me?" He looked up from his coffee. "Because someone should have." Lena frowned. "That's not an answer." He leaned back in the chair. "Maybe not. But it's the truth." There was a sadness in his tone she couldn't name, and for a moment she thought she saw something flicker behind his calm eyes. Guilt, maybe. Regret. When she was discharged, Alexander refused to let her go to a shelter. "You need rest. A quiet place. Somewhere clean and warm for you and the baby." "I can't repay you," she said, voice trembling. "I didn't ask for repayment," he replied. The mansion looked even more unreal in daylight. It wasn't flashy, it was elegant, with ivy climbing the stone walls and sunlight pouring through tall windows. The air smelled faintly of wood polish and roses. Inside, everything was spotless. There were maids, a gardener, even a driver. Lena felt small just standing in the foyer, her hospital wristband still clinging to her skin. "This is too much," she whispered. Alexander turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You've been through enough. Let me help." He walked her to a large guest room overlooking the garden. "You can stay as long as you need," he said quietly. "I'll have the staff set up a crib for the baby." She didn't know what to say. Gratitude, fear, confusion, all tangled inside her chest. "I don't belong here," she finally whispered. He paused at the door. "Maybe not yet. But you deserve to." The days passed slowly. Her body healed, but her mind didn't know how. The mansion was quiet, almost too quiet. Every sound, footsteps in the hall, the clink of dishes downstairs, reminded her that she didn't belong. The staff were polite, but not all of them were kind. She could feel their eyes on her back when she walked into the kitchen, hear their whispers fade when she entered the room. One afternoon, as she passed by the servants' corridor, she heard two maids whispering. "She's lucky, that one said. "Shows up out of nowhere. Gets a room upstairs like she's family." "Lucky?" the other scoffed. "You call that luck? I call that a trap. You think Mr. Cole brings in random women for charity?" "Don't be ridiculous," the first said. "He hasn't looked at anyone since his wife died." Lena froze. His wife? She stepped back quietly before they could see her and hurried down the hall, her heart pounding. So that was it. That was the sadness in his eyes. That night, as she fed her baby in the nursery, she caught herself wondering what kind of man Alexander Cole really was. A rescuer? Or someone trying to fill an old wound with a new face? He never made her feel uncomfortable, never crossed a line. But there was something about his silence that felt like a locked door. He'd saved her life, and yet he seemed to be hiding something of his own. When she saw him in the evenings, they talked like old friends who didn't know how to be close again. "How's the little one?" he asked one night as he poured himself a drink in the library. "Stronger," Lena said softly. "The doctor says he'll be fine." He smiled faintly. "That's good. You did well." She hesitated, then asked, "Did you have children?" His smile faded. He looked into his glass, the amber liquid catching the light. "I did," he said quietly. "Once." She bit her lip. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "You didn't know." He changed the subject after that, and she didn't ask again. But the question burned inside her. What happened to his wife? What happened to his child? Days turned into weeks. Lena began helping around the mansion out of guilt, folding laundry, watering the plants, sorting mail. At first, the staff tried to stop her, saying it wasn't her place, but Alexander told them to let her be. "If it helps her feel normal, let her work," he said simply. And it did help. Routine gave her a small sense of control. One afternoon, he found her in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, pruning roses. "You don't have to do that," he said. She looked up, smiling faintly. "I like it. They remind me that beautiful things can still grow out of pain." He watched her for a long moment, then said, "You're stronger than you think." She looked down at the rose in her hand, its stem bleeding a small thorn mark on her finger. "No," she whispered. "I just ran out of ways to break." Something in her voice made him stop. He didn't try to comfort her. He just knelt beside her and helped trim the next stem, silently sharing the weight of the moment. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, she walked through the corridor and overheard two gardeners talking near the service door. "You hear about the boss's guest?" one said. "The woman with the baby?" "Yeah. People say she's his new mistress." Lena stopped cold. "That can't be true," the other said. "He's not that kind of man." "You sure? A rich man taking in a woman like her?" There's always a reason. Lena hurried away before she could hear more. Her chest tightened. She thought she'd stopped caring what people said, but their words clung to her like mud. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying everything in her mind. Alexander's kindness, his silence, the way he'd avoided personal questions. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was just another charity case or worse, a distraction from his grief. The next morning she avoided him completely, claiming she was tired. She stayed in her room, holding her baby close, whispering, We'll find our own way soon. We can't stay here forever. But that evening, as the rain began again outside, she heard voices echoing faintly from the downstairs hall. Alexander's voice, tense, raised. He rarely raised his voice. She couldn't hear everything, but one phrase stood out. "I told you, I won't let that happen again," he snapped into the phone. Then silence. Lena froze by the staircase. Again? The storm rumbled outside, wind howling through the trees. When she heard her name mentioned, softly, angrily, she felt her stomach twist. She stepped back before he could see her, her pulse racing. Who was he talking to? Why did it sound like he was protecting her from something, or hiding something from her? When she finally returned to her room, she couldn't shake the unease. Alexander was kind, but kindness could hide a lot of secrets. And the next morning, as they met at breakfast, his eyes looked different, weary, almost conflicted. "Lena," he said slowly. "Yes?" He hesitated, like the words were heavy. "There's something you need to know about your husband and my family." Lena's spoon clinked softly against the cup. The air in the dining room felt heavier than it had the night before. The rain outside hadn't stopped, and the gray light coming through the tall windows seemed to drain the warmth from everything. She stared at Alexander, trying to read his face. The words "my husband and my family" echoed in her head. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at his untouched breakfast, as if choosing his next words could rewrite the past. "It's complicated," he said finally. She waited, but he didn't continue. The silence stretched between them until she couldn't bear it anymore. "If it's about Ethan, I deserve to know," she said softly. "You can't keep me here and hide things from me." He looked up sharply as though her tone startled him. "I'm not keeping you here," he said. "You can leave any time." She hesitated, realizing how her words must have sounded. "That's not what I meant. I'm tired of being lied to. I don't know who to trust anymore." Something softened in his face. He leaned back in his chair. "You're right. You do deserve the truth. But right now, I think it'll only hurt you more." Her frustration broke through the thin layer of politeness she'd been clinging to. "Hurt me more?" she said, her voice rising. "What could possibly hurt me more than what's already happened?" He stood abruptly, pushing his chair back with a quiet scrape. "You'd be surprised." She watched him walk away, leaving her staring at the empty space where he'd been. Her chest tightened with confusion and anger. What was he hiding? Later that day, as she rocked her baby in the nursery, she couldn't stop replaying his words. The rain tapped lightly against the window, and the baby's soft breathing filled the silence. She whispered to him, "We'll be fine. We don't need anyone's secrets." But her heart knew that wasn't true. She did need answers. Downstairs, she found the courage to ask the housekeeper, Mrs. Gray, what she knew. The older woman paused from polishing the silver tray and glanced around before speaking. "Mr. Cole doesn't talk about his family," Mrs. Gray said quietly, "but there was trouble years ago. Business trouble. A partner he trusted betrayed him, nearly cost him everything. He's been careful ever since." Lena frowned. "A partner?" Mrs. Gray nodded. "Yes, some say it wasn't just business, though. There was something personal about it. Mr. Cole stopped letting people in after that." Lena thanked her, but her mind was racing. A partner who betrayed him? Could it be Ethan? It sounded impossible. Ethan had never mentioned a man named Cole. But then again, Ethan had lied about everything else. That night she went downstairs for some water and saw Alexander in his study, talking on the phone. The door was slightly open. His back was turned, but his voice carried clearly through the quiet house. "I told you I'd take care of her," he said, his tone clipped. "But you don't get to decide how or when." "I owe you nothing." Lena froze. He sounded angry, controlled, but furious in a way she hadn't heard before. "I said no," he snapped. "She's been through enough. I'm not dragging her into that mess." Her pulse quickened. Who was he talking to? He went silent for a moment, listening, then said coldly, "If you contact me again, I'll end it permanently. Do you understand?" The call ended. He stood there for a long moment, breathing slowly, one hand gripping the edge of the desk. Lena backed away quietly, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at her to ask what that was about. but something told her he wouldn't give her an answer. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. He greeted her with his usual calm tone, complimented the baby's smile, even offered to drive her to the hospital for a checkup. She wanted to believe the warmth in his voice was real, but the image of him in the study wouldn't leave her mind. During the drive, she watched the rain streak down the window. "You're hiding something," she said softly. He glanced at her. "You shouldn't accuse people without proof." "You're right," she said, "but I'm not blind." "I heard you last night." He sighed, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Lena, who were you talking to?" she pressed. "Was it about me? About Ethan?" He didn't answer. His jaw tightened and his eyes stayed on the road. "Please," she whispered. "I've already lived through enough lies. Don't make me doubt you too." They stopped at a red light. The rain hammered harder on the windshield. He turned toward her then, his face unreadable, but his voice low and raw. "You think I'm helping you out of pity," he said. "You think I'm hiding something because I don't trust you. But the truth is, I'm hiding it because I do care. And because I don't want to see that look in your eyes again. The one you had when I found you that night." Lena's throat tightened. "Then tell me what it is." He looked away again, the light turning green. "Not yet." When they reached the hospital, she tried to focus on her appointment, but her thoughts kept circling back to his words. Not yet, not yet. How much more was there she didn't know? That evening, she sat on the balcony while the baby slept, staring at the city lights below. For the first time since meeting Alexander, she felt afraid of him, not physically, but of the part of him she couldn't reach. He came out quietly, standing beside her. For a while they said nothing. The wind carried the faint scent of rain and flowers. "Do you regret helping me?" she asked softly. He looked at her, surprised. "No. Why would I?" "Because I brought chaos into your peaceful life." "Because I remind you of something painful." He gave a faint smile. "Peaceful isn't the same as happy, Lena. You didn't ruin anything. You made me remember what it feels like to care." Her eyes softened. "Then stop keeping me in the dark." He hesitated, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. For a long moment, the only sound was the whisper of wind through the trees. Then with a quiet exhale, he said, "There's something you need to know about your husband and my family." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm, and Lena felt the world tilt again. Everything safe, suddenly uncertain, everything gentle, now shadowed by a truth waiting to be revealed. The city had begun to feel less like a stranger and more like a distant memory. Weeks had passed since Lena nearly lost her life and her baby, and though her body had healed, her heart still walked with a limp. Each morning she woke to the sound of birds outside her window and the quiet hum of the mansion. And for the first time in months, she didn't wake to shouting, to fear, or to the sound of her own sobs. There was peace here, but it was a peace that came with questions she didn't dare ask. She would sometimes watch Alexander from the balcony as he left for work. Always early, always dressed sharply, his expression calm and unreadable. He was a man who carried both grace and weight, the kind that came from living through too many storms and surviving them alone. He had insisted she stay on in his home, not as a guest, but as part of the foundation he ran. "You need something to occupy your mind," he'd said, "something that makes you remember who you are." The Cole Foundation helped struggling women rebuild their lives, women who had faced abuse, poverty, and abandonment. The first time Lena stepped into the office, she felt her chest tighten. So many faces there mirrored the pain she once carried. She learned to manage records, take calls, comfort new arrivals. She wasn't just surviving now. She was part of something that helped others do the same. Every evening when she returned home, Alexander would ask how her day went. He never pried too deeply, but he always listened. When she laughed, his eyes softened, as though he'd forgotten how that sound felt until she reminded him. But there were moments, small, fleeting ones, when something in his gaze changed. When he looked at her, not as a guest or an employee, but as someone he'd known long before that night in the rain. She would catch him watching her with quiet familiarity, like he recognized pieces of her she didn't know she'd lost. One evening after a long day at the foundation, Lena joined him in the garden. The sun was setting, painting gold across the glass windows. She knelt beside the rose bushes, trimming the wilted petals, and said softly, "You know, when I first came here, I thought you were just being kind out of guilt." He looked at her from where he stood near the fountain. "And now?" She smiled faintly. "Now I think maybe you're kind because you understand pain." He said nothing for a while, then replied, "Maybe. Or maybe I just don't like seeing someone suffer when I can do something about it." The simplicity of the answer disarmed her. She studied him quietly. "You don't talk about yourself much." He smiled, a small, almost sad smile. "There isn't much to say." She tilted her head. "There's always something." His eyes lingered on hers for a long second before he turned away. "Maybe someday," he said, and that was the end of it. At night, when the baby was asleep and the house fell silent, Lena often sat by the window, her mind tracing the years that led her here. Sometimes she could still hear Ethan's voice, the shouting, the insults, the sound of the door slamming. But those memories were fading now, like scars that still ached when it rained, but no longer bled. One Saturday morning, Alexander invited her to attend a fundraising event for the foundation. It was her first time going somewhere that required her to dress up since her wedding, and she almost said no. But he convinced her. "It's time people saw your strength," he said. "You represent everything the foundation stands for." The event was held in a hotel ballroom, filled with polished floors and crystal lights. Lena wore a soft blue dress that Mrs. Gray had helped her choose. For the first time in a long time, she looked in the mirror and didn't see a victim. She saw a woman who had survived. As Alexander introduced her to donors and partners, she noticed how everyone respected him. They spoke of him as a man of integrity, of vision, of loyalty. And yet, behind every compliment, there was an undertone of curiosity, as though they wondered what kind of past could make a man so serious, so alone. When the speeches ended, Alexander raised his glass and spoke about rebuilding lives. His words were steady, genuine, but Lena caught something in his voice, an ache buried deep beneath the strength. Afterward, as they stood by the balcony overlooking the city lights, she asked, "Why do you do all this? Helping people like me?" He stared at the skyline for a long moment before answering, "Because once, someone helped me, and I never got the chance to thank them." She frowned softly. "Who?" He smiled faintly. "Someone I should have taken better care of." The cryptic answer lingered in her mind. Later that night, back at the mansion, she couldn't sleep. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the hallway clock. She got up to fetch a glass of water, and on her way back she passed Alexander's study. The door was slightly open, light spilling into the hall. Inside, papers were scattered across the desk. She meant to walk past, but something on the shelf caught her eye, a framed photograph lying face down. She hesitated, then stepped closer and turned it over. Her breath caught. It was an old photograph, slightly faded. Her father stood at the center, smiling proudly, his arm around her teenage shoulders. And beside him, younger but unmistakably the same man, was Alexander Cole. Her heart stuttered. The door creaked behind her. She turned sharply, the frame still in her hand. Alexander stood there, his expression unreadable, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "I guess I should have locked that drawer," he said quietly. Lena's voice trembled. "You knew my father?" He set the glass down and walked toward her, his footsteps slow, deliberate. "Yes, I knew him." "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her heart racing. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes full of something that looked a lot like pain. "Because I didn't know how." She clutched the photograph to her chest. "What were you to him?" He looked down, then back at her. "He was my mentor. The first man who believed I could be more than what I came from. He taught me business, ethics, patience. When he died, I promised him I'd look out for you." Her throat tightened. "You promised him?" "Yes," he said. "You were 16 then." "I remember. You used to bring him lunch at the office every Friday. He'd brag about you to everyone. Said you were the best thing he ever made." Her eyes filled. "I remember you now," she whispered. "You used to visit our house sometimes. My mom would tease me that you were too serious for your age." He smiled faintly. "I was, but I admired your father, and you. She looked down, the memory flickering back. The quiet young man who'd bring files for her father to sign, who'd smile shyly at her across the kitchen table. She'd been just a girl then, too young to understand admiration when she saw it. "What happened after he died?" she asked softly. He exhaled. "I tried to find you. But by the time I did, you were married to Ethan." Her chest tightened at the name. "You found me?" "I tried," he said, "but your husband made sure I couldn't. I sent letters, messages, even tried to reach your mother. Every time I got nothing back. Eventually I heard you'd moved away with Ethan, that you wanted nothing to do with your father's past life." Lena's brows drew together. "That's not true. I never got any letters. My mother never said anything." "Because Ethan made sure of it," Alexander said bitterly. "He told me you'd married well, that you didn't want anyone from your father's old world contacting you again." Her voice trembled. "He told you that?" "Yes," Alexander said, "and I believed him. I thought maybe you wanted to forget. I didn't realize until that night I found you in the rain how wrong I'd been." Lena turned away, pressing a hand to her mouth. The photograph shook in her trembling fingers. "He took everything from me. Even you." "I could have stopped all this," Alexander said quietly, his voice breaking for the first time. "If I hadn't believed what he told me about you, maybe you'd never have gone through what you did. You and your father both trusted me, and I failed you." She turned back to him, her tears spilling freely now. "Don't say that." "You didn't know I should have," he said. "I should have looked harder." For a moment neither spoke. Only the sound of the rain outside filled the silence. The same rain that had brought them together months ago, now falling like an echo of everything lost. Lena sank into the chair by his desk, the photograph still in her lap. "All those years," she whispered, "you were out there, and I thought no one cared." "I did," he said softly. "More than you'll ever know." The raw honesty in his voice made her chest ache. She met his gaze, and for a brief, fragile moment, the pain that tied them together felt almost like fate had meant for them to find each other again. But with that realization came a new storm of emotions: anger, sorrow, confusion. "He destroyed so much," she said, her voice trembling. "My marriage, my reputation, my father's name, and now I find out he even stole the one person who might have helped me." Alexander walked closer and crouched beside her chair. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Her hands shook as she looked at him. "I've been alone for so long, I don't know what it feels like not to." He reached out, then hesitated, his fingers stopping just short of hers. "Then let me remind you." For a heartbeat, the world outside vanished. The thunder, the rain, the years between them. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the weight of all the time they had lost. But before she could speak, the sound of the front gate buzzer broke the moment. Alexander stood quickly, straightening his jacket. "It's late. Who would—" Mrs. Gray's voice came faintly from downstairs. "Sir, someone's here asking for Miss Lena." Lena frowned, startled. "At this hour?" Alexander's expression darkened. "Stay here," he said, and headed downstairs. Lena stood anyway, following slowly behind him. The foyer lights were dim, the sound of rain louder now against the windows. When Alexander opened the door, her breath caught. Ethan stood there. He looked nothing like the man she remembered, his clothes soaked, his hair disheveled, eyes hollow with exhaustion. "Lena," he said, his voice hoarse, "I need to talk to you." Alexander stepped in front of her instantly. "You need to leave." Ethan's eyes flicked to him with a sneer. "Still playing the hero, huh? Thought you'd be taller." "You've already taken everything from her once," Alexander said, his tone low and hard. "You won't touch her again." Ethan laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "Touch her?" "Relax, Cole. I'm not here to start a fight." "Then leave," Alexander said again. Ethan looked past him, his gaze finding Lena. "You think he's your savior, don't you? The noble man who showed up just in time?" He smiled, a cruel twist of his mouth. "Oh, Alex, you think you know her story? You don't even know the half of it." And the words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous, as thunder cracked outside and the lights flickered, leaving them standing at the edge of another truth waiting to destroy everything they'd just begun to rebuild. The rain hadn't stopped since Ethan came back. It was as if the storm that had followed Lena through her worst night had found its way back to her doorstep, unwilling to let her forget. He stood in the doorway of Alexander's mansion, dripping, pale and worn down by whatever life had done to him since the last time she saw his face. He smiled weakly, as if that could erase the years of betrayal between them. Ethan held the envelope out, and when she didn't move, he dropped it on the coffee table. "Go ahead. Read it." Alexander's jaw tightened, but he didn't stop her. She opened the envelope slowly, her hands trembling. Inside were old papers, official, stamped, signed. Her father's name appeared beside Alexander's. A contract. She read the words, her vision blurring as they took shape. It was a deal between her father's construction company and Alexander's firm from years ago, long before she ever married Ethan. Ethan's voice filled the room again. That contract ruined him. Your father trusted Alexander, thought he was helping him stay afloat, but he wasn't. The deal crushed his company. He died broke and heartbroken. And this man, your savior, he's the reason why. Lena's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "That's not true," she whispered, looking up at Alexander. But his face, his silence, frightened her. "Alex," she asked quietly, "tell me it's not true." He took a step forward, his voice low. "That document isn't the full story?" Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "There's always an excuse, isn't there? You rich types, you know how to clean up after yourselves." Alexander's patience snapped. "You're lying, Ethan." "You've always lied," Ethan's smirk grew. "Maybe, but the proof's right there. And maybe she deserves to know the kind of man you really are." Lena clutched the papers against her chest, her breath shaking. The room blurred, her mind spinning. "I need to think," she murmured, stepping back. Alexander reached out. "Lena!" But she was already walking away, her tears burning hot as she fled up the stairs. That night, the mansion felt colder than ever. The sound of rain against the windows was relentless, like it was echoing the storm inside her. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the papers spread before her. Her father's signature, Alexander's company seal. The ink had faded, but the betrayal felt fresh. When she heard a soft knock on the door, she didn't answer. Alexander stepped in anyway, his expression tired but calm. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he said. She looked up at him, her eyes red. "Is it true? Did you ruin my father?" He took a slow breath. "No, but I didn't save him either." Her chest tightened. "What does that mean?" He sat across from her, his hands clasped. "Years ago, your father's company was struggling. Not because of me, but because the local council was corrupt. They cut his funding, withheld payments, and he was drowning in debt. He came to me for help. I agreed to back his company, to protect it from bankruptcy. But I wasn't the only one involved." He looked down, the shame evident in his posture. "Your father had a young employee he trusted completely. Smart, ambitious. He handled all the financial paperwork. That employee was Ethan." Lena's heart stopped. "Ethan?" Alexander nodded. "Your father gave him full access to the company's accounts. I signed the contract expecting him to manage the funds honestly. But he forged additional documents, creating fake transfers. He stole money from both of us, money that was supposed to keep the company alive. When the fraud came to light, your father took the blame. He was too proud to expose Ethan, and the stress killed him." Lena pressed a hand to her mouth, her tears spilling freely. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be." Alexander's voice was steady but heavy. "I didn't ruin your father, Lena. He died protecting a snake that lived under his roof." Her body shook with sobs. She couldn't look at him. The walls seemed to close in around her, the papers on the bed blurring through her tears. "All these years," she said weakly, "I thought my father failed us. I thought you were just a stranger who saved me. But you were there all along, and you knew I didn't know it was Ethan," he said, his voice breaking. "Not until tonight. I spent years trying to find the man who forged those papers, but he disappeared. When I saw him in my doorway earlier, I finally recognized him." Lena buried her face in her hands. "He killed my father, and I married him." Alexander reached for her, but she pulled away. Don't, she whispered. Please don't. He stood, guilt etched into every line of his face. Lena, I swear, if I'd known. But you didn't, she said bitterly. No one did. He fooled all of us. Her voice cracked, and she began to cry again. Not the broken sobs of a victim, but the deep, painful sound of someone grieving for every piece of her life that had been stolen. When the tears finally stopped, she looked up at him, her eyes hollow but calm. What do we do now? Alexander met her gaze. We finish it. 2 nights later, she stood in front of a mirror, dressed in a dark gown. The charity gala Alexander hosted every year was in full swing. The lights, the cameras, the laughter, it all felt too bright, too loud. But tonight wasn't about celebration. Tonight was a reckoning. Ethan had taken the bait easily when Alexander called, pretending reconciliation. You should come, Alexander had said. Lena wants to talk. Now Ethan stood among the guests, pretending charm, his usual swagger returning under the spotlight. Lena stayed close enough to be seen, but far enough to watch him carefully. Alexander's men had discreetly set up hidden cameras around the ballroom. When Ethan found a drink in his hand and an eager listener at his side, he couldn't resist the temptation. He bragged as he always had. You know her father? The great Mr. Harris, he said with a laugh. Old man died thinking he'd lost everything because of a deal. Poor fool never found out the truth. I was the one who emptied his accounts. Man trusted me with his life. The listener, wired with a hidden microphone, nodded encouragingly. You serious? Ethan grinned. Dead serious. I've always been good at pretending. That's how I survived. By the time the conversation ended, Alexander had enough. Within minutes, the footage was uploaded, broadcasted, and shared. The party hadn't even ended when Ethan's phone began to buzz nonstop. Calls from reporters, partners, and creditors. Then the sirens came. Ethan looked up, panic flashing in his eyes as uniformed officers pushed through the doors. Wait, this is a mistake. It's not, Lena said, stepping out of the crowd. Her voice was calm, her expression steady. You finally get to live with the truth you built for everyone else. As the officers cuffed him, he turned to her, his eyes desperate. Lena, please, she shook her head. You took everything that was good in me and turned it into pain. You killed my father. You tried to destroy my life. But you don't get to take my peace. He tried to speak again, but the words were drowned out by the noise of the flashing cameras. The police led him away as Alexander placed a steady hand on her shoulder. It's over, he said quietly. She exhaled shakily. No, it's beginning weeks later. The headlines had faded, but the freedom remained. Lena stood behind a podium at a women's empowerment conference, her baby in her arms. The hall was filled with faces, some smiling, some crying, all listening. Her voice was calm, strong. I was thrown out with nothing but pain and a heartbeat inside me. I thought I'd lost everything, but I found truth, dignity, and peace. Sometimes God doesn't punish you by taking things away. He saves you by removing what was destroying you. Applause filled the room. Alexander stood in the crowd, his eyes soft, pride shimmering through the sadness that had followed him for years. When their eyes met, there was no pity, no guilt, only understanding. Later that night, Lena sat in her room, her baby asleep beside her. The fire crackled quietly in the corner. A small envelope sat on the table. It had arrived from the prison that morning. She'd almost thrown it away unopened, but curiosity won. It was from Ethan. She read the words silently, her expression unreadable. You won, Alex. She never looked at me the way she looked at you, not even once. Lena sighed, folded the letter, and held it over the fire until it caught flame. She watched the paper curl and blacken, the ashes floating upward like ghosts set free. When Alexander entered the room, he saw her staring into the flames, calm and thoughtful. What was that? He asked gently. Nothing worth keeping, she said. He smiled faintly, walking over to where her baby slept. The little girl stirred softly, her small hand curling around Lena's finger. Alexander looked at her with quiet admiration. What will you tell her when she grows up? Lena's eyes glistened as she looked down at her child. That her father's sins made me strong, she whispered, but her mother's courage made her free. And with that, the fire flickered softly, casting a warm light over the room as the night finally, mercifully, grew still.